so much, Jennie, for being here this morning for you, this evening for me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So I'd really like you to start just by you saying a bit about yourself, please, you know, who you are in the world and in particular about your writing.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be with you today. My name is Jennie Linthorst. I am a poet and I have a private practice teaching poetry therapy and guided expressive writing workshops. I have 2 books of poetry and I'm working on my 3rd collection right now. And my work is a unique kind of field. And just to give people a little bit of background of what poetry therapy and guided expressive writing is, I teach private and ongoing groups, mostly adults. I do teach kids and spent 8 years teaching in 3rd grade classrooms, a very specific type of how I would teach craft of poetry, but also wanting to bring in more of the therapeutic sense of it and getting these kids to really explore their narratives through using poetic language and continue to teach kids writing groups. But my practice is mostly adults. I'm on the faculty of UCLA Arts and Healing and help with their trainings and people that are looking to learn techniques and tools in the expressive arts. And the way that poetry therapy and guided expressive writing works is I'm using mostly accessible poems about life themes. And I would put one in front of you and ask you to find yourself in the piece. And what is it bringing up for in your life experience? And I'm trained to pull that story out of you and then encourage you to write in response to what comes forward. And we're not trying to write a publishable poem at that point, or even a poem. It's mostly journal writing and really just that first write to really feel safe that you're not going to be critiqued or edited. And then we look at what comes forward in the writing more for therapeutic value. What are you discovering about yourself? Where are you feeling emotion when you hear your voice read what you've written? And then that can take us to next steps. But I have lots of people who've been in groups for years and people that work with me privately. My most popular private course is Your Story Starts Here, which is a 10-session life story course where we go through childhood and your family lineage, the female legacy, the male legacy, love and relationships, aging, grief. And by the end, I have many clients that have 30 plus writings that they do then want to edit. And I can put on that hat as well and help teach them more of the craft as well. But it starts in more of a safe therapeutic way.
It sounds amazing, Jennie. I mean, I haven't been trained in the way that you're trained, but I know how writing helps me and has helped me during really tough times, and how writing can bring something out for people and learning for themselves. So it just sounds fantastic what you're doing. It sounds so lovely. So can I ask you then, how did you get started with writing? Like, you know, when, how? Anything you want to say about that?
I've been writing journals probably since my early teenage years. I think I was always connected to music lyrics and writing in response to those, and definitely writing journals. And it wasn't until my grandmother was a poet. That's how I really began to sense the autobiographical narrative poetry. And she had a book that was very autobiographical, and she didn't start writing until her 60s, but wrote a lot about her family, growing up, and aging. And I kind of stumbled into the field of poetry therapy through her book, and ended up bringing it into a retirement home and reading it aloud, and just instinctually having them write from sentences in her book. I remember in my mirror, we would discuss a poem of hers and then they would write. And I didn't realize that I was actually doing the poetry therapy process. And at that point, I stumbled into the field of it and began to study and train for my certification.
Wow.
which was like a 2.5 year process. But part of it was taking a lot of courses in literature, poetry. And at that point, it opened something inside me when I found the teacher that I ended up studying with for, gosh, we've been studying together now 20 years.
Wow.
And I started to study intensely with her this kind of method writing that I continue to study with other teachers as well. But that's when I really discovered my poetic voice. And I was also starting to facilitate poetry therapy groups under my certification, and I would write with them. So it started more therapeutically, but then I was also studying the craft at the same time. So it really started to merge, and my voice, I discovered my voice at that time.
It's funny, isn't it? It sounded like you instinctively knew right from an early age about writing from or about or to, I don't know quite what the word is, but using other pieces of writing and then turning it on yourself and writing for yourself. It's interesting that it's that instinct right from the start.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back, and so my college friends always kind of laugh when they found out that that's the path I took. I was studying psychology and dance, actually. I came from a dance background, and I was writing my college thesis on the therapeutic effects of the arts. And they would laugh at me later saying, you were always the one that would pull us into your room and put on a song that we had to hear that was representing whatever we were feeling. You had a song for it. And that really is what it is. So I was always very drawn to language that could capture the human condition. I wanted somebody to help me feel less alone, and then try and write in response to that. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So what do you write on a daily basis now? What would you call your writing practice, or how would you describe your writing practice now?
I have always, I prefer to have some sort of structure by being in some sort of class or community. And Stella Sue Lee was my teacher for so long. And I loved studying with her because we would get into a rhythm. We would have a phone call where she would give me the next exercise that I was supposed to understand. And then I would go off and write and email them to her, and then we would talk through it. But that kind of structure is the best writing for me, so that someone's holding me accountable. So, gosh, for the past 20 years, I've either been studying with her, or I've then been joining, I spent a lot of time in courses in the Poetry Salon here in LA, which is more of an editing kind of workshop. But we also write in the group to start, and then we each bring in two poems that we want some feedback on. So that kept me writing. And what I loved, my process now is, I like to take 6 or 8 week courses like that. And then there's usually a little bit of a break, right?
Yeah.
So I'm constantly writing and so forth. And I'm also writing in my groups. Realize that I have, a day group and an evening group that meets monthly. I write with them. And I also do the homework exercise prompt that I send them. So I've got that writing going too. And once I finish a 6 or 8 week course, I go back to my journal. I'm a handwriter. And at that point, during that break, I give my heart and my mind a break from the actual output, and then go into typing, finding the poem that I think is in the handwritten and typing it up, which is part of editing, and then really working on that. And then I think you're going to ask me about editing, which I'll wait. Into that. But that's really my process, is to be in some sort of course, whether I'm learning new craft, or I'm currently right now in the middle of Jules's method writing, which is the same stuff that I studied with Stella Sue 20 years ago. But I've loved being a beginner and how Jules is teaching Jack Crapes' method writing. So I'm rediscovering my voice in a new way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been studying with Jules for 2 years now, and I just absolutely love it. It's just it's amazing what it can bring out in your writing, isn't it? Well, it is
Yes.
to me, definitely.
And
So,
I'm starting to dabble in prose now because of her.
uh-huh.
And that's very scary to me because I like the container of a poem.
Right.
But I'm trying to be very gentle with myself to allow this time to be a learning time.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. So it has just been poetry all of this time then, up until now, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And poetry that I've published.
Mm,
That's the only thing that it's my love. To me, it's really, it's a way that I can capture the snapshots of my moments in my life.
mm,
And it's been so healing to have some sort of feeling or experience and run to my notebook to try and capture it. And the more that I study the craft and have the tools, um, it's just, I'm a creative. I love to allow the creative process to move through me. And in other ways creative too, and cooking is a love of mine. I'm also doing mixed media painting, so anything that I can immerse myself like that. But it's the writing of the
mm,
poem and the container that captures a moment for me.
yeah. Just as you said that, what occurred to me was that with the method writing, with the Jack Grape's method writing, I don't know any others, so that's what I think of it. I can see how with the expansiveness of what we're learning in the method writing would help really to explore and pull apart the things that people are exploring in the therapeutic poetry. Like, it just occurred to me as you were saying that's probably how that helps.
Yeah, it's different in that it's very structured.
Mm,
I mean, it's not structured in that from method writing and wanting to start out with the journal to the transformation line. You don't have something in mind. You're not doing it from a prompt.
no.
Whereas in the poetry therapy format, you are putting something out there, but it also is a magic process too, because you have every person in a group. Let's say if I'm doing it, has a different response and
Yes.
what sparks inside of them.
Mm,
Similarly to the transformation line, I think,
yeah.
in that they come up with a transformation line based on what is triggered for them.
Mm,
So yes, and I have found the process of the journal transformation line into all of those voices to be a way to access
mm,
what needs to be explored.
yeah. Oh, lovely. So you mentioned editing. So can you tell me about your editing process then?
So right now I found that, you always taking some sort of class. And then during the break, I'm typing it up into my computer and doing as much of my own editing as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I've learned and what has helped me so much is to form a community of writers and my mentors that help me um, get it to a final product and help me through the submission process to literary journals.
Mm,
And right now, my process is to do as much editing as I can, get 6 to 8 pieces ready to go. And then I now go back to my former teacher, Stella Suley, and we have an editing session where she goes through those poems, gives me feedback. I go back and forth with her until I feel like we've got them where they are. And then I am now working with a woman who's helping me. Alexis. And I'm forgetting her last name right now.
I'm sure she'll forgive you.
I can look that up. But she has a wonderful website called Submat Central, and she helps poets with their submissions, which I just don't have time for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to do all that research.
Mm-hmm.
I want to stick to my writing and my poetry therapy practice. So once I have those, she requires 10 poems. So once I get a group of 10 that I feel like are ready to go, I give them to Alexis, and she actually does a whole nother workup of editing. It usually isn't that much at that point,
Mm,
but then she actually does the research and sends me a list of literary journals and kind of takes that research part out of it. And then I submit all of the stuff and get things published. So the last round of this new collection that I'm working on, when I was consistently doing that process, we had like 27 out of the 45 poems that I sent to her picked up for publication.
Wow.
So that it's having a community, and I find I can't do it alone. I can't edit and submit alone. It's a process where I need support so that the poems are the best they can be.
I know it's probably a really an obvious answer to you, but I know some of the people that I'm working with are very, very early on in the experience of writing and writing a book, and editing comes as something as a surprise. So can you speak a bit to like why you're editing so much?
Oh gosh, I'm currently taking a course right now with the great poet Ellen Bass. This is her second round, and this is a revision class, and it's 6 weeks of her and inviting other poets in to share their pieces as they've been revised. And it's just graduate level study of editing. For me, it's, and I see it therapeutically too, because I think that when you take a piece that you feel is done, and then you get some feedback, or you ask yourself those questions. Where is it really beginning? Where is the heart of this? Where is it really ending? I mean, new writers, new poets that I work with tend to want to like sum it all up at the end with a bow. And in poetry, you got to end strong. And oftentimes you got to cut off that whole ending that you think is, or you need to dig a little deeper. What exactly am I saying here? Where is the syntax going to show that in the best way? Where is the line break going to add a pause in the right way? And titles need revisions. And it's just a deeper way of looking at how it's going to be shown in the world. And it's a hard process. And that's why I like to do it more with community, with help, than just by myself. But it's so important. I mean, that first draft is so important. I mean, I think that's where you really have to let it flow and overflow.
Yes.
And not edit and not try and show and instead of tell, and go ahead and tell. But when you, and over tell, but then when you go back to that editing, where are those abstractions? Where are those more psychological terms like loneliness or grief? And don't say it, show it. And then you can go back in and really go deeper. But I find all of that to be therapeutic.
Yeah, I love the editing as much as I love the actual initial writing. But I love what you said about evolving community as well, because I think there's only so much we can see ourselves, isn't there? And then, but I think you're right. It's best to do as much as you can yourself, and then involve somebody else after that. So you've had 2 books of poetry published, and you've got a third one coming on the go.
I'm really stalling on this.
Well, we might talk about that in a moment then. But so tell me about how you got your books published.
It was very serendipitous. I was in the middle of studying with Stella Sue, and we were very much immersed. My first 2 books, obviously I came at it from a therapeutic place. Each of them really covers very intense themes of things I was going through at that time. My first book, Autism Disrupted, A Mother's Journey of Hope, is all the poems that I had been writing since my son at a very early age, like not even 2 years old. We entered a scary time where we were thrown into developmental delays, and it looked like this gray area of autism, but not really classic autism, but with sensory processing disorder. And he went through years of intense therapy. And the only way I could deal with it while he was working so hard with therapists was for me to try and capture the experience as a mother. And so Stella Sue and I were still working together, and it was actually her that said, She was starting a small press publishing company, and my husband had just released a documentary film about our experience with our son. My husband's a filmmaker and a screenwriter, and that was his way of healing, was to document this and to try and help other families that were in this gray area. And it was released on PBS and into 70 million households, and translated into different languages, and still used to this day for advocacy for these kids to get the right kind of therapies. And so she knew that I had a bit of a platform, and she asked me to submit a manuscript to her new publishing company. And that was so scary. You know, I knew nothing. I had had a few of these poems picked up for publication, but you know, it was new to me, and it was terrifying. But, and so she accepted the manuscript, and then we started the whole process of editing. You know, every week we were going through it. We went through it like 3 or 4 times. And then she had, as part of her small press, her husband is an artist, and he handled the cover. And then they had a book designer and the printer. And so that was very exciting. So that was my first book. And then only about 3 years later, because I had written so much with her, and another huge theme in my life is that I lost my mom to cancer when I was 12 years old, and I was 9 when she got diagnosed. So I had a whole collection of writings about the memories of her being ill in childhood, but also who I am today as a woman and a wife and a mother, in living in that legacy of the loss of my mom. I mean, it continues to be a huge theme in my life. So I had another manuscript pretty fast, and again, submitted it to Stella Sue because she still had the small press. And then that was my second book, called Silver Girl.
Brilliant.
So that all happened kind of quickly.
That's so good. So good. It sounds like it was best happening really quickly for you.
Yeah, because now it's been a huge stretch of time in between.
So you mentioned about being terrified, so I really want to ask about that kind of thing. So what are the gremlins that you get? What are the kind of things that kind of hold you back or prevent you from doing what you want to do in the writing?
Oh, I have
How
so
do you get
many
past
gremlins. I think my biggest one, and this kind of feeds into my practice too, because my practice is me, right? You have to sell yourself.
Yeah.
And I really dislike the promotional marketing aspect of all of it. And I am at that generation, you know, I'm 48 years old. I missed that whole social media, woo, let's get on it. I mean, I'm kind of on it, but I do not like any of that. And so that's really hard for me. I mean, the way that my business truly runs, mostly by word of mouth, and my newsletters, which I can put out as often as I want, when I have a space opening in a group, or if I have a book that's come out. But I find that to be very uncomfortable. And I think my gremlins are more the thoughts of, why would anybody care? Not so much about my business, because I'm helping other people.
Yeah.
Why would anybody care to read these poems? So I think that's one, but I think a deeper one is that I write very honestly. And I write very honestly about my family. You know, I have a lot about my marriage. You know, we've been together 23 years. I describe our ups and our downs. I mean, I very much put it on the page, and that's what I ask my clients to do. And I also write a lot about my son. And as he got older, he's 17 now, I have to be careful. You know, that's kind of his story to tell. He's, you know, doing great and looking at colleges, and we've had quite a journey, but you know, I have to weigh that.
Yes.
And I think that's one reason why this third book is very delayed in some ways. I don't mind so much putting it out there to the literary journals, because I'm not, you know, putting that out to the world. And I love that I'm getting feedback from that and from my community and writing groups that I'm in. And I do know that when I write in my most honest, it helps other people
Mm.
feel less alone.
Yeah.
So, but I'm very much waiting on whether I need this actual book to come out. You know, it's very
Yeah.
much about my raising him and parenthood and looking back at Tennessee, where I'm from, and
Mm-hmm.
feeling very far away from that. So, you know, it's those insecurities, it's those being afraid of judgment, of, you know, afraid of judgment for the people that I write about. It's kind of a fine line.
Mm. Yeah. So how do you kind of get past that? Because you have published, and it does sound like you're really weighing up whether to publish the latest one. And I think a lot of people would relate to that, because a lot of things that people do write about, especially if they've had difficult family relationships and they're writing about those kind of things, it can be really hard, and you have to be a bit careful as well, I guess. So
Yeah, and I think it's a bravery. It's a stepping into knowing that what you have to say might help one person, and if it can help one person, then it's worth it.
mm,
And I think right now during the pandemic, this has been such a fragile time for so many people. I think part of my delay too is I've really needed to be gentle on myself about pushing myself to have some deadline that this
mm-hmm.
has to be a book.
Yeah.
And right now, and that I needed to really focus on my home and my marriage and my son being so isolated in his teenage years. And I really took this time to dive back in as a student.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important too. If you need to, you know, really go back inside and just let yourself write because you're being inspired to test your voice in new ways, it doesn't have to always be out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that eventually this collection, I'll be ready to work with Alexis and really dive into the process. And I think we will submit this differently because Stella sued, actually her press, she shut it down. So, you know, that's a whole nother process. And I think we have to be gentle on how hard we're whipping the whip, you know?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
right now during the pandemic, I've had to really be like, hey, be gentle with yourself. Go ahead, take all these classes, take some painting classes, keep feeding your clients. I've had to be there for so many people during this that I just, you know, we got to get through this however we can.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's so nice, because I think people, they get the idea of the book and then it's got to be. I remember when Jules said to me, because I've written a book that I've not published yet, and she said to me, you know, this book might never get published. And I was just horrified. I was like, you know, why have I spent all this time writing it if it's not going to get published? But it let me off the hook in terms of the need to push and get it out there. And I haven't touched it for a while, but I do know that I'm going to go back to it, and I do know it's had a few edits and it's going to need some more yet. But it kind of lets you off the hook as well, doesn't it? And I think it kind of allows you to see the book for what it is without the pressure of needing it to be something.
Yeah. And that's the only way that you know that you're actually really ready to put it out in the world. And then you won't have as many gremlins. When I always kind of felt like that was, I mean, it was exciting, but it was also, I was just kind of terrified through the whole thing, you know? And then you want to get back to writing.
Yeah.
I did enjoy doing the readings. You know, that was really special because you're connecting with people, but it's about the writing of it.
Yeah.
And then for me, letting other people help me with knowing how to get it out there. And honestly, if I do it again, one way to go pushing through the gremlins, I think I know something about myself now that I may actually hire someone to help me with the marketing and whatever. I mean, I don't know how they do it depending on where, if it gets published or how they set up readings and stuff. But, you know, the social media and stuff, I don't know if I ever really want to do a lot of that.
Yeah. It sounds like a good plan to me. Okay. So I want to, I'm conscious of a bit of the time now, so I'm trying to keep these to about half an hour, but I tend to go over a little bit. But what would be would you have one tip? I mean, I'm sure that there's more than one, but one tip for anybody who's fairly new to writing, or at the beginning, kind of they're just getting into the journey of writing a book. What tips or advice would you give?
I think the biggest thing is to get community support in the writing community.
Mm-hmm.
To be in groups that are healthy, you know, where you are getting good feedback, to be taking classes where you've got inspirational teachers, you know, even maybe teaming up with another writer. If you're writing a novel, or say, you know, team up with somebody who you can work together to set deadlines and accountability. Like I need people to keep me accountable. I need a deadline to be like, okay, I got to turn that in. I got to get this edited by this time. And I think even if it's just one other writer, but to be in community so that you have set goals that you're working towards, and you have support.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the marketing, find somebody or a friend that does it. If you can't pay somebody to help you with it, or maybe wherever you're publishing, they do that for you. But lean into where you need support and help you keep things on track.
Yeah. Oh, that's really lovely advice. What occurred to me when you said about getting people to give you good feedback, I was reminded of when I wrote my first book. Like, I didn't have any real experience of writing books or editing or anything like that with my first book. I don't know quite how that one happened, but it did, and I got a publishing deal, and it's done really well. But I remember kind of instinctively knowing that I needed feedback, and I picked some people, and two people were really, really absolutely brilliant in terms of giving me feedback, but it was very constructive, challenging, questioning, because that book was actually an academic book. So they really, really, the two of them really challenged me to write the best book that I could. And then the other three people just were going, brilliant, fab, great, wonderful, and all this kind of thing. And I remember at the time kind of being a bit, well, I'm not so sure that that's helpful, but actually it was a really good balance. So it's, for me, it's like kind of thinking about the people who you can get support from, and the kind of support that they can give you, and have a balance. It's like, it's not like, for me, the editing, it's not a criticism. It can feel that way. Like, I know how I can bristle when I first get the feedback. I remember with the book that I wrote last summer, Jules was helping me with the editing of that. And the first email that she sent back, like, oh my God, I went into a tailspin. I hadn't even read a word. I was like so frightened of the feedback, but it's so helpful. I learned so much from that. It's like, so I really get, like, getting people to help you write the best book that you can. It's worth it, isn't it?
Yeah. And to know, like you said, you know, get people you trust for the feedback. And, you know, Ellen Bass in this revision class, she just said recently, you know, be careful of those big writing group critique groups, right? Because too much feedback can also be detrimental. So take it all in, review it, and then, you know, you are ultimately the decider.
Yes.
But you should have one or two people that you really don't ever send anything out until they have looked over it very carefully. But you also have to put yourself in a mind frame of being able to hear the feedback.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's hard.
It is. Lovely. Thank you so much, Jenny. So would you like just to say a bit about where people can find out about the wonderful programs that you're doing, and about your books? Where will they go to find you?
Yeah, my website is probably the best place to see the different course offerings that I have. And you can also purchase my books on there. My books are also on Amazon. But my website is lifespeakspoetrytherapy.com.
Okay.
And
we'll put a link on here as well, so people can find it.
Yeah. I've so enjoyed this. I can keep going on and on.
I know, me too. It's like, it's a discipline to keep them to 30 or 40 minutes, to be honest, because I have such lovely conversations. There's so many things I could have picked up on. I was like, oh, yeah, we could talk for hours. So thank you so much, Jenny. It's just been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.